My name is Emma. I'm 31 years old. And on my wedding day, my mother-in-law stood up, lifted her glass, and said, "Let's toast to my son finally finding a worthy wife, maybe next time." The room went dead silent. And then, I did something no one expected. Before I tell you what happened next, hit like and subscribe if you want to know how this story ends. Drop a comment with where you're watching from, your support helps more people hear it. The quartet stopped mid-phrase, a violin string hanging in the air like a question nobody would answer. The lights were warm and golden, washing the ballroom in the kind of glow you pay extra for in the brochure, but it didn't touch the ice sliding under my skin. The microphone in her hand crackled. A few people laughed the nervous, apologetic laugh guests use when they're not sure if they're witnessing a joke or a crime. I watched the joke land, heavy and deliberate, and I watched the crime scene form around it. Tom, my brand new husband, stared at the tablecloth. His fork was still tines down in the salmon, balanced like it might decide on its own whether to fall. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at her. He looked at the pattern in the linen, as if there were instructions woven into it for moments like this. My bouquet sat on the head table, already losing its fight with the heat, petals loosening, one by one, collapsing with quiet little sighs. I could hear the videographer's gimbal hum as he pivoted. I could hear someone at the bar set a glass down too hard. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and betrayed. The DJ cued down the music completely. A toast from the mother of the groom, he had announced moments earlier, cheerful and blind. Now he hovered, eyes wide, waiting to see which way the night would tilt. Maybe next time. She smiled when she said it. Not the nervous smile of someone who tripped over a word. The fixed smile of someone who chose the word, polished it, and brought it here in her bag. Helen, never mom, not once, had a talent for arranging rooms, flowers, napkins, people. She had arranged me, too, in the exact place where the chandelier light would catch my dress and the camera would catch my reaction. The guests searched each other's faces like mirrors. The best man's mouth made a small O before he remembered to close it. Tom's sister pressed her lips together. My maid of honor moved 1 inch in my direction and stopped, pinned by etiquette to her chair. Somewhere in the back, a child asked too loudly, what did she mean, and his mother shushed him as if the word itself could break glass. I inhaled. It tasted like buttercream and fear. This wasn't the first jab. It was simply the loudest. Earlier, she had mistakenly broken the clasp on my necklace while helping me fix my veil. 2 weeks ago, she'd sent a text suggesting a different dress that would be more flattering for your frame. Last month, she'd posted a photo with the caption, "Can't wait to welcome the perfect woman into our family someday," which she later claimed referred to some hypothetical future daughter-in-law who didn't even exist yet. The pattern didn't need my imagination, it had documentation. Still, weddings are made of truce paper. You wrap things carefully and pretend the tape holds. Helen raised her glass higher, as if inviting the room to finish the joke with her. The crystal caught the light in clean, hard prisms. She looked beautiful. That was always part of her power, the way cruelty can wear couture and be mistaken for sophistication. To growth, she added pleasantly, and to high standards. A few clinks answered her. Not many. Enough. I looked at Tom again. Say something, I thought. He had promised, in soft twilight conversations, in the quiet bravery of the almost married, that if anything like this ever happened, he would speak. He would be a wall with a door, not a curtain in a draft. His jaw moved once, twice. Nothing came out. My throat felt tight, but not fragile. Tight like a knot right before you pull it clean. The MC recovered first, reaching for the script. "Let's give it up for," he began, and then reconsidered the wisdom of asking anyone to give it up for anything. Plates shifted. Silverware chimed. At the second table, my aunt set her napkin down very carefully, a tiny white flag that meant the opposite of surrender. I could have laughed. I could have cried. I could have let it pass, added it to the anthology of small humiliations women are told to collect and label grace. But the thing about pretending you don't bleed is that it doesn't stop the cut. It just ruins the dress. The room smelled of roses and champagne and something singed, like a candle wick snuffed with fingers. My heels were suddenly too loud in my own imagination. I noticed everything, the cake standing 3 tiers tall, fondant smooth as untroubled water, the photographer's hand hovering, unsure if this was a memory I would ever want, the thin white line where my ring had pressed into my finger all afternoon, a new gravity I was supposed to get used to. Helen sat down, satisfied, folding her napkin in a perfect triangle. She had delivered her message, the way couriers do in old stories where nobody remembers the messenger's name, only the arrow. I touched the microphone. It was warm from her hand. "Thank you," I said. "Every eye found me. Even Tom's. For your high standards," I added, and a few people exhaled in relief, misreading the direction the wind would blow. Helen tilted her head just enough to register curiosity, not concern. She had never seen me angry. She had seen me polite, and polite is easy to manage. Angry, in the right hands, can be surgical. I could feel my pulse settle, one steady drum behind the words I hadn't planned and didn't need to plan. Some moments don't require preparation. They require presence. I let the silence grow roots. I let it claim the carpet and the corners and the ceiling trusses. I let it reach her. Then I smiled, small, not sweet. And I began. I wasn't born into marble floors and chandeliers. My story began in a small New England town, the kind of place where neighbors still borrowed sugar and people waved to each other from porches. My parents worked ordinary jobs but carried extraordinary hearts. My father drove a city bus for 35 years, his hands rough from gripping the wheel through snowstorms and traffic jams. My mother worked at a public library, the kind of woman who believed that a child with a library card already had a ticket to a bigger world. From them, I inherited 2 things, resilience and a belief that kindness matters more than pedigree. We didn't take vacations to Europe, we drove to the coast in a second-hand station wagon. We didn't dine in restaurants with Michelin stars, we ate spaghetti with laughter around a scratched wooden table. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. It was love that showed up, love that made space. By the time I reached my late 20s, I had carved a life of my own. I became a speech therapist, specializing in children who struggled to find their voices. It wasn't lucrative, but it was meaningful. The look on a child's face when they managed to pronounce a sound they'd battled for months, that was priceless. I rented a modest apartment, drove a sensible car, and surrounded myself with a circle of friends who knew the value of inside jokes and midnight takeout runs. Then came Tom. We met at a friend's wedding, a warm May evening strung with fairy lights. He was the best man, standing confidently in his tailored suit, his easy smile drawing people like moths to a lamp. I was a bridesmaid, fussing with my dress and telling myself I would leave after one dance. But when he asked me, there was no leaving. We danced until the staff stacked chairs around us, and it felt like the whole room belonged to that rhythm, that conversation. Tom came from a different universe. His father, William, ran a successful investment firm. His mother, Helen, descended from a family whose last names opened doors on their own. Tom had attended private schools with manicured lawns, then the Ivy League, then carved out a career as a corporate attorney in a glass tower downtown. Everything about him radiated polish. And yet, beneath that polish, there was warmth. He asked questions that made me laugh, told stories that revealed both ambition and humility, and seemed fascinated by my work with children, a subject many others brushed aside. Our romance was quick, like stepping into an elevator and realizing it was already headed to the top floor. Within 6 months, he proposed on a windswept Cape Cod beach, the horizon blurring sea and sky into something infinite. I said yes with my whole heart. I believed love could bridge the distance between our worlds. What I didn't realize then was that his world wasn't built only on money and prestige, it was built on gatekeepers. I met Helen for the first time at our engagement dinner. William shook my hand firmly, polite but distracted, his conversation drifting toward market trends even as we sat over champagne. Helen, though, was a different force entirely. Dressed in a silk dress that looked effortless but surely cost more than my rent, she carried herself like royalty in exile, making every room her kingdom. "Emma, isn't it?" she said, her smile precise but brittle. "And where exactly did you grow up?" "Just outside Boston," I replied. "And your parents' occupations?" Her tone was casual, but her eyes scanned like a security system. "My dad's a bus driver, my mom works at the library." Her smile didn't waver, but something in her expression shifted, like a shutter clicking closed. She turned the conversation toward Tom's ex-girlfriend, Julia, reminiscing about charity galas and Martha's Vineyard summers, pulling up a photo on her phone with casual cruelty. "Such a shame it didn't work out," she said sweetly. That night, Tom kissed my hand and told me not to worry. "She just needs time," he reassured. "She'll come around." But time has a way of deepening grooves instead of smoothing them. At family gatherings, I noticed the pattern. Helen would praise Elaine, Tom's sister, for her achievements, interrupting me whenever I tried to answer a question. She would beam at Michael, Tom's older brother, and his wife, who had joined the family business as if that decision alone stamped her with approval. Meanwhile, she scrutinized me in silence, her gaze lingering on my dress, my jewelry, my every choice. I tried to win her over. I brought thoughtful gifts, like a crystal vase for her birthday, that never made it out of the box. I offered to help with her charity auctions, only to be told the committee was already set. I researched topics she cared about, steering conversations toward art exhibitions and travel, but she responded with clipped answers or none at all. Only one person gave me genuine kindness, Aunt Margot, my mother's sister, who lived not far from Tom's family. She had history with William, college friends, long before he married Helen, and that connection allowed her a place at the table Helen would otherwise have denied. Margot became my anchor, the voice reminding me that exclusion wasn't always my fault, that sometimes people weaponize coldness to maintain control. Still, I told myself things would change. After all, families adapt. Love softens edges. And wasn't marriage about building bridges? But some bridges, I would soon learn, were never meant to hold weight. The months leading up to the wedding should have been the happiest of my life. Instead, they became a slow-motion obstacle course carefully constructed by Helen. Every celebration, every planning session, every so-called family dinner turned into an audition I was destined to fail. It started subtly. A seating chart where my name was mysteriously left off the first draft. A group photo where Helen asked me to step aside so she could get just the family. A Christmas gift exchange where somehow everyone received something wrapped in gold paper except me. "Oh, was your name not on the list?" she said innocently, tilting her head like a cat watching a trapped bird. I tried not to let it sink in. Tom insisted these were oversights, accidents. "You know my mom," he said, pouring me a glass of wine after yet another tense dinner. "She can be particular. But she doesn't mean harm." I wanted to believe him. I wanted so badly for that to be true. But harm doesn't require intention. Repetition alone can bruise a soul. One evening, while we were finalizing floral arrangements, Helen leaned across the glossy table and ran her finger down the list. "Peonies are so romantic," she said, then glanced at me. "But they wilt quickly. Fragile things, like some women. Do you agree, Emma?" Her eyes pinned me, daring me to acknowledge the barb. I smiled politely, pretending I hadn't heard what everyone else at the table surely had. Another time, she helped me adjust my veil during a dress fitting. With one tug too sharp, the clasp on my necklace snapped, scattering pearls across the floor. "Oh dear," she gasped, not bending down to help. Perhaps it wasn't quality craftsmanship. Better it breaks now than on the day itself. Tom wasn't there for that. He never seemed to be there for the worst moments. When I told him afterward, he kissed my forehead and murmured, "She's under stress. This wedding is a big deal for her, too." For her. Those two words cut deeper than he realized. By the time invitations went out, I had developed an internal radar for slights. Servers at family dinners consistently passed me by until I raised my hand. Conversations shifted whenever I entered the room. At a charity gala, Helen introduced me not as Tom's fiancée but as Emma, who works with children. Her tone implied charity work, a hobby, not a career. Such a noble little field, she added with a smile that felt like a knife hidden in velvet. The worst part wasn't Helen's cruelty, it was Tom's silence. He never challenged her, never interrupted, never once put a hand on my back and said, "Enough." He rationalized, minimized, explained. If I push back, she'll double down. If we keep the peace, she'll soften. But peace built on one person's silence isn't peace. It's erasure. Aunt Margot was the only one who acknowledged what was happening. After one particularly brutal dinner, she walked me to my car. "She's testing you," Margot said quietly. "Helen thrives on control. You bend, she pushes further. You resist, she pushes harder. Either way, she feeds on the reaction. Don't give her what she wants." I nodded, but inside I was unraveling. Because it wasn't just Helen I had to contend with, it was the family system that orbited her like planets around the sun. Elaine, Tom's sister, joined in the digs, correcting my etiquette or forgetting to include me in group chats about family plans. Michael and his wife Stephanie kept their distance, cordial but cold, following Helen's lead. Even William, kind but detached, did nothing to intervene. The rehearsal dinner was my breaking point, though I didn't realize it at the time. Helen had chosen the venue, an exclusive country club with a dress code stricter than some courthouses. The menu cards arrived with everyone's names embossed in gold, everyone except mine. "Oh, must have been a printing error," she said lightly. "We'll just write yours in by hand." She borrowed a ballpoint pen from the waiter and scribbled Emma in shaky ink. The contrast between the elegant calligraphy and the cheap scrawl burned itself into my memory. During dessert, she raised her glass for a toast. "To family," she said. "To those who carry the Harrington legacy forward." My name was absent, my presence erased in the very sentence meant to include. Driving home that night, I sat in silence while Tom talked about the wine selection. Finally, I asked, "Do you not see it? Do you not hear what she says?" He sighed, gripping the steering wheel. "Emma, if we focus on every little thing, we'll go crazy. It's just her way. Her way." As if cruelty were a personality quirk. By the time the wedding day arrived, I wasn't just nervous about walking down the aisle. I was nervous about walking into a room with her. What would she do? What would she say? How much more could she take from me before Tom noticed, or before I disappeared completely? My own parents, unable to travel from Boston due to health and finances, had sent their love from afar. It broke my heart they weren't there, but I told myself it would be fine with Tom's family by my side. I told myself I could endure one more night. Just one more performance for the sake of vows, photos, memories. Afterward, I would be his wife, and surely that title would shield me. Surely. But shields can crack. And when they do, the strike that lands isn't just painful, it's transformative. I didn't know it yet, but the humiliation she had been sharpening for months would finally cut through on that stage, with a microphone in her hand and 1,000 eyes on me. And in that moment, I would discover something she never anticipated, that the quieter you keep someone, the louder they eventually learn to roar. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne flutes, and the curated perfection of a wedding planned down to the minute. The music faded, and all eyes turned toward Helen as she rose from her seat at the head table. She looked regal in her champagne-colored gown, pearls glowing against her neck, every hair in place. When she took the microphone from the DJ, I expected the usual polite toast, a compliment to the bride, a memory about the groom, maybe a joke to make the crowd laugh. Instead, she looked directly at me. "Let's raise a glass," she said, her smile as sharp as crystal. "To my son, for finally finding a worthy wife, perhaps next time." Silence. Pure, suffocating silence. It was the kind of silence that makes forks freeze midair, that makes even the band stop playing though no one told them to. Glasses hovered, suspended between motion and collapse. I felt the words hit me physically, like a stone through stained glass. The entire room was waiting for me to shatter. Tom stared at his plate, cutting his salmon into small, neat squares. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at her. He just kept cutting, as though if he made the pieces small enough, the moment would shrink with them. A laugh, nervous, brittle, escaped someone in the back, but it died quickly. My aunt's mouth dropped open. Margot gripped the edge of the table. The photographer hesitated, unsure whether to take the shot. I could feel the burn of humiliation crawl up my neck. My hands trembled in my lap, but my voice, the one thing I'd trained children to find, remained steady inside me. My entire life I'd taught kids how to use their voices. Now it was my turn to use mine. I reached for the microphone. It was still warm from Helen's hand. "Thank you," I said, and the crowd exhaled in collective relief, misinterpreting my tone. Some even chuckled, thinking I would brush it off. Helen tilted her head, certain she'd won. But I didn't hand the microphone back. "For your high standards," I continued, letting the pause stretch until it pressed against every corner of the room. "You see, tonight I learned something. I learned that some people measure worth by last names, by bank accounts, by country clubs and connections. And some people measure worth by character, by loyalty, by love." The silence thickened, no longer relief but anticipation. I came into this family believing love was enough to bridge any gap. That if I worked hard enough, dressed well enough, smiled long enough, I could earn my place. But what I see now is that nothing I do will ever be enough, because the game was rigged from the start. Gasps echoed softly. I caught Margot's eyes, brimming with tears, silently telling me to go on. I turned toward Tom. "And you," I said, my voice low but clear, "the man I married today. You promised to stand by me, to protect me, to be my partner. But when your mother stood up and announced to this room that I am not worthy, you said nothing. You always say nothing." Tom's fork clinked against the plate. "Emma, please," he muttered, still not looking at me. "No," I said firmly, the word ringing louder than the chandeliers. "Not tonight. Not ever again." Guests shifted uncomfortably, but no one stopped me. They wanted to hear it, they needed to hear it, because everyone had witnessed the cruelty. They just hadn't expected me to answer it. I placed my bouquet down, its petals already wilting, and stood. My dress whispered against the marble floor as I stepped out from behind the head table. My heart hammered, but my head was clear, clearer than it had ever been. "Helen," I said, turning back to face her. "You may see me as an outsider. You may believe I don't belong. But let me make this easy for you. Consider your wish granted. From this moment forward, you no longer have to explain me, tolerate me, or pretend I'm part of your family. I release you from the burden." The room erupted in whispers. A spoon clattered to the ground. Helen's smile faltered for the first time all night, the mask slipping to reveal shock underneath. I placed the microphone on the table with deliberate calm, folded my napkin, and looked one last time at the man who had promised forever. His eyes flickered with panic, but still, he said nothing. That silence told me everything. Then I walked out. Through the ballroom doors, past the shocked faces, down the hall lined with roses that suddenly smelled like ashes. I could feel every eye on my back, but for the first time I didn't care. Dignity was the only thing I had left, and I carried it like a crown. In the cool night air outside, I finally let myself breathe. My hands shook, but my voice had never been stronger. And that was the night I stopped begging to belong. The morning after what should have been my wedding night, I woke not in a honeymoon suite but on my Aunt Margot's couch, still in the slip I had worn under my gown. My makeup had smudged, my bouquet lay wilted on the floor, and my phone buzzed endlessly on the coffee table. Messages. Missed calls. Tom. Helen. Unknown numbers from family members who had been in that ballroom. I didn't answer. When I finally opened the phone hours later, the texts came in a pattern as predictable as Helen herself. First, outrage. You humiliated us. You ruined everything. Then, denial. You overreacted. It was a joke. And finally, control disguised as concern. You need help. Call us back before you make things worse. Not once did the words "I'm sorry" appear. Not from her. Not from Tom. Margot made coffee, strong and black, and set the mug in my hands. You know, she said gently, courage doesn't always look like slaying dragons. Sometimes it looks like walking away from a table where love is no longer being served. Her words stayed with me. In the weeks that followed, Tom tried. He left voicemails about talking things through, about how family is complicated and Mom didn't mean it that way. He showed up at Margot's once, flowers in hand, eyes pleading. Emma, we can fix this. We just need time. I stood in the doorway, my arms crossed over my chest. Time doesn't heal a wound if the knife is still in it, I told him. And you never pulled the knife out. You let her twist it. He had no answer for that. Slowly, the call stopped. The flowers stopped. The silence, which once had been his greatest betrayal, became a gift. I filed for an annulment. The paperwork was clinical, almost absurdly simple compared to the complexity of the emotions behind it. A few signatures, a few court dates, and legally, the marriage evaporated like smoke. What remained, though, was not emptiness, it was clarity. I threw myself back into my work. The children I helped each day reminded me that voices, once found, cannot be taken away. A boy who stuttered his way through "Good morning" eventually shouted it across the playground with pride. A girl who whispered her S sounds learned to sing them in a school choir. Watching them, I realized, my voice had cracked open in that ballroom, but it hadn't broken. It had expanded. Margot stood by me through it all. On difficult nights, she reminded me, you didn't lose a family, you refused to lose yourself. That distinction became my anchor. Months later, I moved into a new apartment. The walls were bare at first, but slowly filled with my own photos, my own laughter, my own proof of life reclaimed. I hung no pictures of Tom, no reminders of the Harringtons. Instead, I framed a simple quote I had once seen in my grandmother's Bible: your worth is not determined by their inability to see it. And when I looked at it, I didn't think of Helen anymore. I thought of myself. 1 year after that infamous night, I attended another wedding, this time as a guest, not a bride. When the mother of the groom stood to toast, she lifted her glass and said, "We are so lucky to welcome Sarah into our family. She is already a daughter to us." The room cheered, and I smiled, not bitter but grateful. Grateful that somewhere, families know how to love without conditions. As for me, I learned that family is not defined by last names or bloodlines. It is defined by respect. By loyalty. By the courage to choose love over appearances. So if you are watching this and you've ever felt like the outsider at someone else's table, remember, you are not required to shrink to fit someone else's small definition of family. You are allowed to stand. You are allowed to walk. And sometimes, walking away is the most powerful toast you will ever make. Because the night Helen tried to strip me of dignity was the night I finally crowned myself with it. And I promise you this, I may have left that ballroom alone, but I didn't leave broken. I left free.